Hi, welcome to our video education session on fats. My name is Julie and I'm one of the registered dietitians in the cardiac rehabilitation program at St. Mary's General Hospital. Today we will be talking about fat in our diet. We will look at why we care about fat, including the fat story, and we'll take a look at the effects of different fats on our blood cholesterol levels. We'll take a deeper dive into discussions about plant fat, saturated fat, trans fats, and as always, leave you with some specific action steps so that you can start participating and implementing some of these changes that we're talking about. A simple divide of foods that contain fats look like this. You can see the examples that I have up on the top of the slide. They really refer to any fresh, whole, real food, so any food in its original version, as opposed to something that's highly processed, can be part of a healthy diet. Your best sources of healthy fats should be from those plant foods, things like oils, nuts, seeds, and nut and seed butters. Lean animal sources would come from things like lean poultry, lean red meat, lean pork, skim milk, dairy foods, and eggs. At the end of the day, trying to choose fresh, whole, real foods will always give you healthier fats, and trying to avoid highly processed foods will be the heart healthiest way to go. In our discussion about the effects of fat on blood cholesterol, we're going to take a look at two main types of blood cholesterol, LDL and HDL. LDL, as you can see here, is represented by the yellow circle, and it's often the one that's referred to as bad cholesterol. It actually stands for low density lipoprotein, but I think the easiest way to remember it is that L stands for lousy. You can see what happens when you get too much of this LDL building up in the artery wall. They like to embed themselves on the inside of the wall, and over time that can attract more LDL particles and become very, very sticky, and then actually calcifies and hardens over time. What ends up happening is you get a narrowing of the artery, as you can see in this picture. That will impact negatively how well that blood flow can get through the artery. And remember, your blood flow is supplying oxygenated blood to all your body cells. So that poses a lot of problems and is a form of heart disease. The green circle represents the opposite to LDL. That's the HDL for high density lipoprotein. We refer to that one as the good cholesterol because it acts like a transport truck to help clear out the bad guys. So obviously you want to try to have the lowest levels possible of LDL and have the highest levels possible of HDL. We'll take a look now at the specific kinds of fats in your diets that will impart that benefit. So your plant fats are excellent sources of what we call unsaturated fat. Now, unsaturated fat helps to lower your LDL, or that lousy cholesterol, and helps to protect that HDL. They are usually a liquid oil at room temperature. Some specific fats or foods that are rather rich in sources of unsaturated fats would be things like olive oil, avocado oil, canola oil, and nuts like almonds, pecans, cashews, filberts, and peanuts. You really can't go wrong with nuts, but these are some of the ones that are particularly high in a type of unsaturated fat that is beneficial to your heart. Seeds are the same thing. Any kind of seed is excellent, but pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds would be really good go-to for daily use. All natural nut butters, so things like all natural peanut butter, almond butter, or cashew butter are also good choices. Look for nut butters with only one ingredient, the nut. Avocado is an excellent food source of these heart-healthy unsaturated fats as well. Slicing avocado daily in a salad or a sandwich, or using your overripe avocado in a smoothie or even in guacamole would all be really good, easy ways to incorporate this very healthy source of unsaturated fat into your diet. The opposite to our liquid-sourced unsaturated fats would be saturated fats, which are usually solid at room temperature. The reason that we want to pay attention and limit saturated fats is because it does have an impact on the LDL cholesterol levels and causes it to increase. So sources of saturated fat, things like meat fat or your full-fat dairy foods, eggs, butter, lard, coconut oil, vegetable oil shortening, And then any processed food that has been made with vegetable oil shortening or has been fried, as in fried takeout or restaurant foods, would also be potential sources of saturated fat. Oftentimes, I'll get asked the question about the difference between butter versus margarine, or olive oil versus coconut oil. So I thought putting together this little chart would be useful. You can see across the top, there's really no difference in terms of calorie level. All these oils that are based on 1 tablespoon per measure, so we have to use the same measure to compare. So per tablespoon, they all roughly have about 100 calories. Total fat is very similar in the range from 11 to 14 grams per tablespoon. What differs significantly is the amount of saturated fat. So only 2 grams in olive oil versus 12 grams in coconut oil, 7 grams in butter versus 1.5 in a non-hydrogenated margarine. A non-hydrogenated margarine means it's made without the use of partially hydrogenated oils, so it won't contain any trans fats. Bottom line here is these fats can fit into a healthy, balanced diet. However, you do want to pay attention to how much you have, how often you have it, and I would suggest, because of the benefits to plant oils, like olive oil in particular, and the anti-inflammatory properties that it contains, that you would be better choosing an olive oil as your daily go-to choice. With coconut oil, there are definitely other types of saturated fat within the oil itself that are not as detrimental to heart health. However, it's still very saturated, and at the end of the day, you're trying to minimize your exposure to that saturated fat. At 12 grams per day, that's not a lot of room for coconut oil on a daily basis. Remember, you're only allowed up to 15 grams of saturated fat per day. So certainly if a recipe calls for coconut oil and you want to give it that coconut flavor, then sure, use it. But small amounts only once in a while would be recommended for coconut oil. When it comes to butter versus margarine, it boils down to amount. If you want to try and go for the least processed food, then of course butter would be the option over margarine. Once again, at the end of the day though, the better go-to as your primary source should be a liquid oil, for example, olive oil. Trans fats are a particularly nasty fat, and you can see that it raises the LDL cholesterol and lowers your HDL cholesterol. It's very pro-inflammatory, and so it promotes heart disease. Health Canada banned it back in 2018 with a complete phase out by September 2020. So we don't have to be concerned with man-made trans fats in our food supply anymore. We still do need to discuss natural trans fats, which is very different from the artificial or man-made trans fats. Natural trans fats occur in all ruminant animals. So foods from ruminant animals like cattle or sheep will have very small amounts of this naturally occurring trans fats. In full-fat milk, yogurt, cheese, or fatty meats is where you find it. It is not as detrimental to your heart health, but it's still advisable for optimal health to make wise selections when you're choosing dairy foods or your meats. So going for the lowest fat choices, such as a 0 or 1% milk fat milk or a 0 or 1% milk fat yogurt. Choosing leaner cuts of meats, and both of these strategies will expose you to the least amount of saturated fat and therefore hardly any naturally occurring trans fats. So what are some specific action steps that you can take? Right off the bat would be to choose about 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil, canola oil, or avocado daily. Use it in cooking, at the table, or when you make your homemade salads, as well as using lower fat dairy products, so either 0 or 1%, and of course, more plant-based whole foods over highly processed foods. We can't emphasize this enough. Fresh, whole, real foods is where it's at. Lastly, if you have any specific questions regarding your own personal diet, feel free to book a consult with one of our registered dietitians. Thanks for listening.